Good evening and welcome to the, what is the date today? March 4th, 2026 Planning and Development Subcommittee of the Gloucester City Council. I'm the chair, Jason Grow. To my left is Dylan Benson, Ward 2 Councilor, and to my right is Hannah Kimberly, also an at-large councilor. You are an at-large, right? We have Lyons Jones here keeping us in check. This meeting is obviously open to the public. There's a Zoom link that is, if you're interested, is on the agenda. You're welcome to that. We have one item that we have to continue tonight, which is Special Council Permit 2026-002, which is a application for Sargent Street. That is going to be continued until until March 18th. I believe that's the date that was given, March 18th. It'll come back to us later. So we only have two items on the agenda. We'll take St. Peter's Fiesta Committee first. Joe, would you like to come up and tell us what you have planned? Yeah, right up there.
Hi, I'm Joe Novello. I'm here with Anthony Cusimano, who's also a member of the Fiesta Committee. As we do every year, we submit a request to Planning and Development for the use of St. Peter's Park and some surrounding areas, which are highlighted on the letter that we sent. It's the same areas that we've used every year. Nothing's changed. Extends from Mansfield Way, which is the alley next to the St. Peter's Club, down to 33 Commercial Street, which used to be the Chamber of Commerce building. And then it goes down to Western Avenue on the boulevard, 50 feet this side of the Fisherman's Statue down to where the tavern building is.
Yes, we've done this year after year exactly the same way.
Same exact, yep.
Does anyone have any questions about when is Fiesta this year? It's
Fiesta is June 24th to the 28th.
All right. So in order to just get this moving along, if there are no questions.
Is this is the 99?
99.
Right? So next year will be the 100th.
99.
So hopefully there'll be some exciting things to plan for the 100th.
If we're still here, we're working on it.
I know you are, and I'm looking forward to it. So
can we all get tattoos for the 100th?
Excuse me?
Can we get tattoos for the 100th?
Yeah, you can get tattoos.
I'm not getting a tattoo.
Oh, I might do that. We'll see. All right. Just so you know, this has all been reviewed by the Special Events Advisory Commission, Police, DPW, City Hall. Everyone has reviewed this. The carnival rides have been approved by the Licensing Commission. The event has been approved by the SEAC. And with that, I will read a rather lengthy motion. I move to recommend that the City Council allow the 2026 annual St. Peter's Fiesta commencing on Wednesday evening, June 24th, 2026, through Sunday, June 28th, 2026, for the purpose of conducting the St. Peter's Fiesta on the days and dates mentioned herein, and allowing the St. Peter's Fiesta Committee from June 24th through June 28th, 2026, to have the use and control of St. Peter's Park on Rogers Street, the streets and sidewalks of Rogers Street from Mansfield Way to the entrance of Commercial Street, including the dock deck area behind 11 Rogers Street, Commercial Street up to Fort Square, and from the intersection of Main and Washington Streets to St. Peter's Park, and on Friday, June 26th, Saturday, June 27th, and Sunday, June 28th, on only the water side of Stacy Boulevard from 30 Western Avenue, the Tavern, to the Fisherman's Memorial, and the Shiramataro Gemolero Playground at Fort Square for the purpose of conducting the St. Peter's Fiesta on the days and dates mentioned above with the following conditions. One, that the St. Peter's Fiesta Committee by June 5th, 2026 file a certificate of insurance naming the City of Gloucester as the certificate holder with the city clerk. Two, that the kiddie rides, those restricted to children of a height of 42 inches or under, be kept at the St. Peter's Square Park. Three, that the footprint of the Fiesta be drawn on a plan showing locations of, but not limited to, comfort stations and the first aid stations to be placed on file with the city clerk by June 5th, 2026. Four, that the music and rides closest to the altar area be shut down at the opening and closing ceremonies. 5, vendors shall not be allowed on the right-hand side of Commercial Street nor on the streets and sidewalks from 2 Washington Street to 33 Commercial Street. Vendor trailers must be parked elsewhere as directed by the Gloucester Police Department with arrangements for such parking made in advance of the start of the St. Peter's Fiesta. 6, fixed vendors permitted by the City of Gloucester located on Stacy Boulevard are allowed to stay in place and vend during the fiesta. 7, vendors on Stacy Boulevard must stay on the sidewalk and use weights for their tents. Stakes are prohibited. 8, handicap parking spaces must be kept clear at all times. 9, parking spaces can be used by vendors near the public landing on Stacy Boulevard, but can't locate in the middle of the landing or block users of the landing in any way. 10, all peddlers, canvassers, and solicitors and others who encroach upon or occupy in any way these areas without the express consent of the St. Peter's Fiesta Committee are to be considered trespassers and to be in violation of Gloucester Code of Ordinance, Chapter 14, Section 14-6, trespass. Finally, 11, the completed application with required documents, insurance, and sign-offs must be received in hand by the office of the city clerk no later than 3 p.m. on Wednesday, June 24th, 2026, as required by the Licensing Commission, and I so move.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion?
Just a question. We're looking at the kiddie rides shall be kept at St. Peter's Square Park. There's going to be no rides beyond that. I know,
No.
yeah, I knew that. I just want some
Right.
public. No, there's not going to be no rides.
Yeah. Everything's in
Everything's
the
gonna
park.
be there. Yeah,
Yes.
I know in years past there would be rides before
Right.
the hotel.
Yep.
Stuff like that. So, well, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. With that, all in favor?
Aye.
Viva. All opposed? 0. Thank you very much, Joe. Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Mr.
Thank you
Castellano.
all so much.
Have a great fiesta. We'll see you then. All right. The other item on the agenda tonight, number 2, special council permit 2026-002, the application of, oh, that's not it. That's the one that's being continued. My apologies. Special council permit 2026-003, the application of Gloucester, Maine LLC to construct a mixed-use residential development including 40 residential units and retail and/or restaurant space under Gloucester zoning ordinance sections 1.8.3, standard to be applied, 1.10.1, jurisdiction of the City Council and Zoning Board of Appeals, subsection A, City Council, 3.2.2, dimensional requirements for multifamily dwellings and their accessory uses other than signs. Footnote A, the minimum lot area per dwelling unit or minimum open space per dwelling unit. 2.3.1, residential uses, subsection 8, conversion to or new multifamily or apartment dwelling, 7 or more dwelling units. 3.1.6B, building heights in excess of 35 feet. And 5.7.5, special permit criteria, major project at Main Street, number 150, map 8, lot 64 in the Central Business and City, the CCD district. With that, we have Deb Ellison here on behalf of the applicant to give a presentation. I just want to start out that this is not a public hearing. At this point, we're not going to take testimony from people. Depending on how rambunctious the crowd gets, we might take some questions later on. I try to keep this as focused as possible on the presentation at this point. At any time, people can send us questions. I will endeavor to make sure that all questions and concerns are asked and addressed. So you can always send me questions and I will bring them up at any meetings, or you can bring me questions tonight if you don't feel comfortable asking them yourself. But we'll see how that goes. And with that, Ms. Ellison, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Deborah Ellison, Ellison Law Office, 470 Washington Street, Gloucester. The applicant and owner is Gloucester, Maine LLC. And with us tonight is Chris Boyce and Glenn Warren as representatives. The architect is Util, and Michael LeBlanc and Catherine Bilgan are here on behalf of the architect. The property is located at 150 Main Street. And tonight, what we'd like to do is give you a legal summary of the requested relief, a brief overview of the project. The architects will give a presentation with regard to the design, and then I will go through the legal summary of why we believe the requested relief should be granted.
Can I stop you real quick for 1 second? We had this issue on a previous application that came before us that footnote E on 3.2.2, the distance between buildings, does that not apply in this particular case?
It does not apply in this case because it's considered one building.
Okay. That's it. I just wanted to make sure we didn't miss it. Go ahead.
Thank you for that. So this is the site plan that shows what are, in essence, from above the ground, look at two buildings, but beneath the ground, it has shares one parking. And so for building code purposes and zoning purposes, it's considered one building. The applicant is converting the building that's presently permitted for a bank and seeking to convert it to mixed residential and commercial space. The bank has not been operational at this location for several years, leaving a hole in the fabric of both Main Street and Middle Street. The property sits in both the CB district, which is the Main Street side, and the CCD district, which is the Middle Street side. Approximately one half of the lot is zoned CB and the other half CCD. The Middle Street portion of the lot also sits in the historic district. The Main Street portion does not. As you may know, commercial uses in the CB and CCD zones have 0 front, rear, and side yard setback requirements and may be constructed lot line to lot line, which is exactly what the bank has been constructed as. Residential uses do have setbacks with a multiplier based on height. Hence, there was a need for variances from the zoning board. On January 8th, 2026, the Zoning Board of Appeals voted by unanimous vote to grant variances for lot width, front yard, side yard, a portion of the parking aisle width, and front yard vegetative cover on Main Street. Despite the complexities of this site, the project only required 5 variances. And if it had been a commercial use, none of these variances would have been required. On January 13th, 2026, the Historic District Commission also voted by unanimous vote to grant a certificate of appropriateness for the Middle Street building. And there was one condition with regard to the windows that has been incorporated into the plans that were filed with the City Council. We are seeking 4 special permits under GZO 2.3.1 subsection 8 for multifamily with 40 units. Under 5.7.1 for a major project with 61 bedrooms, under 3.2.2 footnote A to reduce the lot area and open space per dwelling requirement, and under 3.1.6B for a building over 35 feet in height. The project has been thoughtfully designed to fit in the 2 distinct neighborhoods, and it abuts both Main Street and Middle Street. Rate consideration has been given to its residential and commercial abutters. The applicant has reached out directly to the residential abutters, left a letter and contact information at their homes, also met with several of those abutters to go over the plans and answer their questions, also met with Bank Gloucester, which is the most direct commercial abutter, and they will continue to maintain contact with the neighbors over time and during the construction of the project. Now I'd like to turn it over to Chris Boyce, the owner's representative, to give you an overview of the project and background.
Thank you, Deb.
I'm going to have you give your name and business name for the record.
Sure. For the record, I'm Chris Boyce. I represent Gloucester, Maine, LLC. Address, if you need it for the record, is 221 Woodside Ave in Winthrop, Mass. Give a little bit about who we are, and I wanted to answer some kind of key questions about the project. So the ownership group is Fox Creek Capital, owns the LLC for this entity. We're a family-owned development group on the North Shore here, based out of Ipswich. And our philosophy is pretty simple, right? We invest with intention, we hire the right firms and design with care, and then we build projects that we really believe will strengthen the community that they're a part of. We're long-term owners, which is really worth saying. This is not a project, and none of our projects are such that we would develop and sell at any point. We hope to hold on to this long time. We will be neighbors in the community. That's the vision for this project. That's the vision of our development group. It's with that mindset that we approach our development to 150 Main Street. Today, as you probably know, the site is a vacant bank use. And in the future, we hope to envision something that really contributes to downtown Gloucester. Take away the surface asphalt and the vacant, underutilized space and create something really special. So what the project does, got to look here, are three important things. There's a lot that we'll touch on in our presentation today, but three important areas. It creates housing where the city's comprehensive plan showed a desire for new housing. So the downtown core was expressed as an area that housing is vital. It strengthens the downtown core, and that's what we feel our project helps create. It creates 40 rental apartments. These will be all rentals. Important to note, and I'll talk about it a few times here, because that means it's professionally managed, it's maintained by us, it has a viable, stable tax base. That's how we're able to stay as long-term owners and managers. It's located in downtown Gloucester, which means it's in walkable distance of jobs, shops, and services. And then it brings new retail, what we hope to be exciting retail to Main Street. So the vacant storefront that's there today, we hope to replace with a ground floor retail space. That's 3,500 square feet is what we're targeting now. That 3,500 square feet brings the obvious, right? It brings jobs, it brings foot traffic, especially when you think of an urban plan, it brings foot traffic to the end of Main Street that really needs it, with a very transparent storefront, and it brings new economic activity. The last thing that this project really can focus on is it improves the site itself, right? So it's not just a vacant site today of surface asphalt. You'll see in our presentation, as our design firm walks through, it brings new green space. It brings a green mid-block garden, a mid-block green space that kind of doesn't exist elsewhere in the city. It brings new buffers on Middle Street that will be greened and vibrant. It hides all the parking below grade, so there's no visible vehicular traffic, which means it closes curb cuts. So the curb cut that's on Middle Street will be closed, which really enhances the pedestrian experience. This kind of walks you through the comprehensive plan. So before the more exciting and fun part of the presentation, when Michael LeBlanc from UT will walk you through the design, there's a couple of questions that, as I talk to abutters, continue to come up, right? And they are the kind of questions that I think every development should be asked. First one is traffic. So traffic was a major concern, understandably. Understandable for any new development in a city that is dense and vibrant. So for that reason, we hired Bowman Consulting Group. Bowman is a traffic and transportation engineer. We hired them to do an independent analysis. They use, and you've probably heard this before, ITE, which is the Institute of Transportation Engineers. It's a nationally recognized study that understands traffic in different environments around the country. So at a high level, that their traffic shows that at the busiest hour of the day, when you see and look through the report, they refer to as peak hours. Peak hours is relative to our project, what our peak hours are. The busiest time of day for our project will be 57 to 59 trips. Vehicular trips is how this is assessed. For context, the previous use, which was a bank with some office space in the upper floors, under those same standards would have contributed 146 trips. Right, so that's a third of the trips, approximately, that our project is generating. They're also very different in their nature. Those trips are residential trips, which means that they're egress in the morning and they're ingress in the evening. Those are typical commuter hours where the bank would probably see traffic throughout the day. It's also, it's important when you look at the report and you kind of look through how those trips are calculated, that not all trips associated with the project, we count them all, we represent them all, but they're not all new trips, if that makes sense. Think of retail. You might come visit our store, maybe you're visiting 4 or 5 other stores. The synergy of our retail space with double-sided retail on Main Street really starts to create multiple trips. Everybody has to count them, but they are shared amongst the neighborhood. Some of those trips end up not being vehicular trips. Some of our quote unquote visitors are walking visitors. They come to the site by other means. They parked in a community lot, they've come elsewhere, right? So the 57 to 59 trips is important. It's a reduction from what the existing building would have been, or when it was active, I should say. But they're not all vehicular trips, which is important. That's one of the advantages of housing in a walkable downtown core. They shift in a suburban nature, those trips are counted, but in a walkable downtown core, those shift from vehicular traffic to walkable traffic, right? Your neighbors, hopefully in this proposed project, your neighbors are going to be walking to get coffee, walking to the restaurants downtown. Some of them even walking to the commuter rail, which is within a 5-minute walk from our property, right? So that may be their commute daily. And our below grade parking is an opportunity to store your car for your longer weekend trips, right? So just wanted to kind of frame how traffic has been analyzed for this project. The report is pretty robust, and we're willing to kind of talk about it more. I'm sure questions will come up. The other important piece is economic impact. A lot of study always around that. We used RKG engineers. RKG Associates really is a fiscal and economic impact analyst. I know the city of Gloucester has used them as a third-party peer reviewer in the past for projects. They work kind of across the Commonwealth in a lot of different municipalities. They've studied small development projects, large-scale urban plans. They kind of understand our North Shore neighborhoods. Their work really evaluates municipal revenues, municipal service costs, and economic activity that could be generated by the project, whether it be residential or retail. I'll keep these numbers high level because we're in the early stages of these conversations. So property tax impact, obviously this is a redevelopment of a vacant property. That on its own poses a significant increase in taxable value. But a project like this, that's a rental property, so the building, as the owner, the building is taxed, not each individual unit is taxed. Building is taxed, that'll bring in hundreds of thousands of dollars of taxable income annually to the city. Local spending is where it's a little more tangible sometimes. I mean, taxes, we will have a defined number, but local spending, we'll have 40 households. The 40 units that are living downtown represent meaningful spending in the local economy. So a lot of this data suggests that some of the models show $15,000 to $25,000 is spent per household annually on retail and dining. So if we're going to assume that part of that spending, part of that $15,000 to $25,000 annual spend occurs locally, occurs because you're walking down the street, occurs because you're in the local amenity-rich Main Street of Gloucester, that still represents hundreds of thousands of dollars spent supporting the local businesses, which is meaningful. So that's the restaurants, that's the shops, the cafes, are all benefited from this walkable community that is spending those dollars at their front door, right? Those jobs go farther, that economic growth farther. There's the construction jobs that will be created, while we build this project over the course of 2 years, and then there's the long-term jobs that are property management, that are the commercial space, the 3,500 square feet of commercial space at the base. Those are meaningful jobs to the local community. Maybe worth noting, I think a lot of abutters, when I asked the question and the impact between rental and condo, would these be rental or would they be condo? I think that it is kind of important to note. Research suggests, and we find in our own thesis for these projects, that rentals are great for the local and neighborhood community. It really allows, it supports workforce accessibility, right? So if you're looking for jobs downtown, your goal is to live downtown. The barrier to own and enter that market is difficult. So to rent in an area that you're going to work is far more desirable. So this allows residents to live closer to employment centers or the local businesses that they select to be a part of, right? So that creates this vibrant foot traffic. It also is more accessible, young workforce, downsizing couples. There's a lot of different groups that will occupy these rentals, and they are fluid in the local economy. So, to kind of summarize before the fun stuff, as I said, it's a vacant building today, surrounded largely by asphalt, right? Sometimes we have to assess what is the change. The change that we're kind of proposing here is new housing downtown, new storefronts and retail centers, green space being created and green buffers on all sides of the building and in the mid-block connection, hidden recessed parking with curb cuts being closed, and most importantly, year-round residents that are part of the community and supporting downtown. It's also important that the way we think of our projects and the way we hope you all think about this project is that housing projects like this really are not just housing developments, which they're sometimes labeled as. This is really an investment in the long-term vitality of downtown Gloucester. Bringing residents that live on Main Street helps the downtown economic core. Downtown housing can be looked at as economic infrastructure in itself. Right. So those are some of the questions we've been asked. I'm sure there'll be more questions that come up through the course of the presentation. Michael LeBlanc from UTIL will walk you through the design, the character, the look and feel of the project, and how we hope to kind of blend with the local environment.
And just introduce the name and address for the record, please.
All right, hopefully that makes it so you can hear me just fine. Michael LeBlanc, I'm a partner at UTIL. We're an architecture and planning office at 115 Kingston Street in Boston. All right, so trying to put some visuals to some of the things that Chris and Deb just talked about here. So a few images here of the site. On the left, you can see we've got.
You could do me a favor and get a little closer to the mic, because that goes to the folks at home and they won't be able to hear you. That's perfect. Thank
All
you.
right, is that better? Perfect. All right. And stop me if that happens again.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So the site is characterized by the Gloucester Bank to our east, which is a commercial property. To our west, we have 75 Middle Street up at the corner of Middle and Hancock, and then heading to the south on Hancock Street, there's another residential building there. And then at the Main Street side of the property, characterized by a lot of commercial buildings that are on the same block there. You can see the right-hand photo, which shows the existing now abandoned Santander storefront. And then the lower right photo, which shows a sort of corner image of the property, and you can see how the building, you know, starts to step up with the grade along the site. We currently have 15 feet of grade change on the site between Main Street and Middle. And, you know, because the property stretches between both of those two different streets, both of those streets have really, you know, very different and unique contexts. And so we felt it was really important to kind of take a deep dive into those and really study what they're all about as we start to think about the way we would approach the design of the building. So Middle Street has an interesting context, which is, you know, home to a range of different scales and uses, including residential, commercial, and civic. You know, we're going to choose at the Middle Street end of our building to kind of focus more on that residential scale, pitched roofs, clapboards, double hung windows, and really try to emulate that. Heading over to Main Street. Main Street is characterized by active ground floor uses, you know, bright, open, transparent storefronts built right up to the property lines, creating well-defined pedestrian experience on the sidewalks. The storefronts, usually above them, there are typically 1, 2, or 3 stories of additional uses. Those range from commercial to residential. Those buildings are, you know, a variety of materials that range from clapboard, brick, stucco even. But, you know, we would say that there is a kind of, you know, broad use of brick in that. And so we were really trying to pick up on that for the Main Street side of the building. So we also took a careful look at the use and you know, how the ground floor uses are distributed along Main Street. You know, the first thing that this told us is that our site is a little bit of a missing tooth or a void of activity along Main Street and as part of the downtown experience. We're proposing new uses here that we feel will increase pedestrian activity to this end of Main Street, and think it'll be a great complement to the surrounding uses directly adjacent to us. Also, as we tried to determine an appropriate massing for the building, you know, we looked at other existing downtown buildings for scale comparison and to look to their relationships to their neighboring buildings. What we found also here is a wide variety of different building scales and heights and relationships. This variety is a kind of a defining feature of downtown Gloucester. As you can see, this diagram, which illustrates the number of buildings in the downtown area that kind of get above the 40-foot height mark here. It's kind of an arbitrary number, but we just sort of chose that was kind of in between where some of the heights we're proposing, and also characterized by this kind of trace over image of downtown Gloucester, which is a historic photo, but it remains much the same as it did then. Where this kind of up and down variety kind of adds to the whole streetscape and street experience for people here. We think it adds a great sort of complexity and beauty to downtown. So the existing site stretches from Main Street to Middle, as we talked about, creates unique challenges such as meaningful grade changes. We do have a historic district boundary which runs right through the site. We have already seen the Historic Commission and have gone through that process and were unanimously approved there. Also, it provides challenges of how you lay out and mass a building here in terms of doing one whole large building which stretches from one side of the property to the other, which creates a lot of bulk. Maybe unnecessarily, and then also thinking about how that might affect issues of mid-block light, air, and other considerations. So, rather than try to propose a building which is long, large, bulky, in footprint and floor plate, we instead pursued a scheme that proposes two smaller buildings, each one which are, we think, thoughtfully scaled to their specific location on the site. They open up mid-block light and air and greenery. The Main Street and Middle Streets are exclusively pedestrian access with residential entrances at both streets and retail access at Main Street. Vehicle access from Hancock Street allows us to slip parking underneath the building and addresses the guideline recommendation to not surround your buildings with a sea of asphalt parking. And as Chris said, we have a 1-to-1 parking ratio, which is kind of remarkable considering from either Main Street or Middle Street, there's really no evidence that there's cars in the project at all. And both at Main Street and Middle Street, our facades and our massing aligned with the adjacent buildings, maintaining the consistent streetscapes and being respectful of the surrounding neighborhood. So I'll just take you through a quick series of diagrams that kind of showed you how we got to where we are. Again, this would be the as of right, long, big, large floor plate, bulky building from front to back. The first thing we thought to do was, well, we should push it out to Main Street because every other building on Main Street operates that way, with the exception of the one house down the street, which is the historic house, which is set back. We then thought about, as we talked about, are there ways to open up the middle of the block, take that program that we were, maybe planning to put there, and then, add that to the Main Street building where it seemed more appropriate, and opened up a nice, beautiful green space or mid-block garden, as we call it. We then recognized that our two residential neighboring buildings to the west of us, could be crowded if we decided to build right up to the allowed setback off of the property line. So we decided that we would push back considerably from there, opening up the ability to have a large planted buffer there, give them more light and air and maybe a nicer view out the back instead of a parking lot. Then after meeting with some of the members of the town planning department, there were some comments about how the building scaled on Main Street. We decided at that point to relook at that area and to push back the upper stories with meaningful step backs, green spaces up there, and terraces to really impact the way that that building is perceived from ground level along Main Street. So, as we discussed, the site has about 15 feet of grade change, from front to back. That allows us, again, to slip the parking underneath the Middle Street building while allowing the retail to daylight on Main Street. This also comes at a fairly significant cost to the project. There's meaningful cost to not only doing below grade parking for a project like this, but there's also meaningful cost in the kind of splitting up of a single building into two different buildings. There's redundant elevators, redundant stair shafts, more building envelope. All of these things are decisions we made really with the intent to try to create two buildings here, which we feel scale better to the neighborhood than one large floor plate building. So we hope you agree that two thoughtfully designed mid-sized buildings are a better solution for downtown than one larger, bulkier project that fits the entire site. So at Middle Street, we've got a building that is a 3-story, but really a 2.5-story with a concealed third story behind pitched roofs. At the mid-block condition, we're at about 3.5 stories on Middle Street. At Main, 4.5 stories there. And then when we get out to Main Street itself on the street side, the building rises up 3 stories before stepping back for a 4th floor, where we begin to break down the scale of that, and then an even more meaningful step back at the upper story, which really creates a condition where you don't see much of that floor at all from Main Street. We'll show you that in a moment. This is just an illustration of where we started. Got a few comments from planning department members about the scale. We looked into stepping back those upper floors. That reduces our square footage on those floors. It also reduces their presence along Main Street. Here's a quick view from the front of the building. This is from the adjacent sidewalk across Main Street. Looking at the building, you can see how those step backs, when scaled just right and step back just right, really diminish any impact they might have on Main Street. A view of it looking to the east. And then another looking to the west from the east. And you can see how the building begins to step back as the hillside starts to make its way up from Main Street. Start to look at Middle Street. As I said earlier, we're really focused on the more residential scale of this street. You can begin to see how our buildings here are broken up in massing to appear to be 2 separate buildings. It really is, one building back here. But through the use of massing, pitched roofs, and well-scaled windows and well-composed facades, we feel like we're really kind of aligning with much of the existing residential buildings along Middle Street here. And hopefully you can see that in this image.
So if I may. So with the pitch roofs, it's showing on the middle. Okay, so here I see it, a different rendering of the way it will look.
Yep.
Because from the other side, it looked like it was 2 buildings, as I was trying to understand how it does, but now I see.
Yeah, so we step back that centerpiece there,
Yeah.
to give it a little bit of relief between the 2. This is a condition, by the way, that you see along Middle Street, with a kind of more formal primary building set to the front, a sort of secondary or service buildings pushed back a little bit. So it's something that as we prepared, our thoughts on this and went through our thinking as we approached the Historic Commission, that this was a kind of important idea for us.
And this is also, when you're touched upon it a little bit, so this is to make it more appear to be in the character of the historic buildings on Middle Street. Is that correct?
That is exactly correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Truth be told, there are lots of larger civic buildings along Middle Street. But some of those were built probably before the historic district was established. We feel like, given our direct neighbors, our direct abutters both across the street and adjacent to us, that this really was kind of the least impactful, most thoughtful and responsive way to approach this part of the site. So view from it, just stepping back a little bit, you can see the edge of Gloucester Bank on the left. You can see 75 Middle to the right of our project. And you can see how our building kind of steps back as it goes back in the site. This is a view looking to the southeast. You can see, again, 75 Middle on our right, how we're scaling with that. You can really begin to see here the kind of step back we have from one building or one part of our facade to the next here. This just begins to reveal a little bit of the planted zone between our buildings and the 2 residential buildings on Middle and Hancock Street. This is a view. This also shows in 3 dimensions the historic district boundary here. So everything to the north of that was what was subject to their review. This shows you where our cars do slip in under this podium and then turn left and go under the Middle Street building. And it gives you a better sense of this, the light and air that are created by this mid-block garden space that we've created here. So in terms, we've done extensive shadow studies on this, both looking at what an as-of-right building would do, and the impacts it would have, as well as the proposed massing that we're here with today. And the differences between those 2 are, there are some differences, but they're really, from a percentage standpoint, they're really not a huge difference. We also, wanted to point out how you can see, particularly on the left here, and at certain times of the day, where this mid-block garden begins to allow light to move through the mid-block and creates a better, lighter airier condition at that particular moment. Just quickly talk about landscape. I was just mentioning some of the beautiful structures and landscapes around our building. This building is, I believe, 90 Middle Street, right across the street from us. You can see how it's characterized by beautiful granite kind of low wall or curb as it may be, but lovely plantings set back a little bit. There's a really beautiful formal nature to that with a center access, pedestrian access to an entry. We thought this was an absolutely beautiful, example for us right there across the street. You can see along the bottom here, we're proposing a lot of indigenous plantings, ones that will take less water, less maintenance, and all of that over time, and will thrive in this particular location. Just quickly to look at this, on the left, you see Middle Street, where we have those sort of two gardens out in front, directly in front of our building. Along the west of our site, which is kind of page down here, the yellow colored landscape is the planted buffer and the additional setbacks we have between our property and our neighbors. And then you can also see the mid-block garden as proposed. Couple things just wanted to point out. We are going to be proposing to remove the curb cut on Middle Street to make Middle Street a more pedestrian scale. So I think it's a great kind of restoration of the pedestrian nature of that street in the historic district. Our transformer is located in an area which is off street and will be concealed. Our subsurface infiltration chambers, stormwater, and all of that, plus utility connections, will be housed on the kind of small portion of the parcel which tabs out to Hancock Street. This is just a quick diagram of how vehicles come in and out of Hancock Street. As Chris talked about, the impact of these vehicles we feel is really quite low in terms of number of cars per minute when even at peak hours. It's really very, very low. Two things I wanted to point out, we as part of the dimensional relief we've been seeking, is that we have a drive aisle that gets a little bit pinched by our elevator shaft there. We don't think it's a problem. We think that the number of cars that are going to be moving through here at any time is going to be really quite low. So it's usually going to be single cars moving at a given moment. And then we have a single lane which gets you in and out of the garage. We think of it a little bit more like a covered bridge kind of situation, where we will have signaling on the inside if someone's coming in, so that if someone is in the inside pulling out, they'll have adequate notice of that. So we don't anticipate any problems, and it's a condition we've done many times in the past. So just to recap, we think this is going to be a great addition to Main Street and Middle Street, Gloucester, and downtown in general. The addition of 40 new year-round households, including 4 affordable units at 60% AMI. We think this project is going to improve the walkability and ground floor retail activation on Main Street. The plans, we plan the site in a way that is individually responsive to both Main Street and Middle Street conditions in those different contexts. We feel like we've provided a really thoughtful landscape, which gives great buffering where needed, gives good, chance for light and air and respite at mid-block and along Main Street. The concealing of the parking below the building and really keeping it entirely off Middle and Main Streets, we think is a real positive feature to the building. We really like the way that this building is reinforcing at the historic district side at Middle Street, the existing residential scale of the buildings. So thank you for all that. And I'll hand it back over to Deb.
Before we go any further, do we have any questions from the council at this point on presentation to date? Yeah, please.
Yeah, so my question, so with the underground parking garage, Will there be, are you looking to do like, what is going to be the process of doing that?
In terms of construction, you're saying?
Correct.
Okay, yeah, yeah, sure. We will, well, currently we have a really nice retaining wall along the side of our property between the parking lot and Gloucester Bank. We also have, we're keeping off of the properties to the west of us far enough that we will be able to excavate that with minimal earth support. At Middle Street, we're going to be excavating very close up to the street. So we'll be using supportive excavation and earth support to keep the sidewalk intact and all of that. We will be rebuilding that part of the sidewalk regardless. But so that will get built or dug out first, and then we will begin to, build the, footings, the foundation walls, and start to come up from there.
Okay. And another question, unless you
Yeah,
two
go
have
for
a
it.
question. The preparation of making sure that there are businesses adjacent to you to make sure they continue to be able to thrive on Main Street while this construction is happening. I can think of the coffee shop there and a few other shops, and obviously the bank is you've been communicating with the bank, but just making sure that they continue, because sometimes as construction happens, businesses do suffer from that ongoing construction with cars coming in and out, et cetera. What is the preparation there to make sure that they continue to thrive during this?
Yeah, so I'll add to that also.
Yep.
Neighboring residents too.
Yes, of course. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yes, of course. I'm just thinking like that's one point, and I appreciate your concerns up there, and I know speaking to Chris and others, I appreciate that as well, the continued communication as you bring this project forward. And you don't always see that with proposed projects, so I can appreciate that from all of you.
It all comes from our client group who's very concerned about all of this. So I would say this could be a long answer, so I'll try to keep it short. Before we submit for building permit, we will be submitting with that a full building logistics plan that will be coming from our contractor, which is Tachi Construction. They're a very capable, contractor. This is a project that is well within their wheelhouse. In fact, they do a lot of much larger projects as well. They are used to working in tight sites in urban areas and downtown areas. And they will certainly be proposing access to and from the site that will be very considerate of all of downtown businesses. I would imagine we'll be staying off Main Street as much as possible with any trucks coming and going. But that remains to be determined by them and then to be approved by your building department. I'd also say that our contractors will certainly make every effort to reach out to all of the neighboring buildings, residents and everything to make sure that they have direct contact, if need be, to the superintendent. If there's something happening in the middle of the day that is overly disruptive, that they will be able to be in touch with the contractor. Working hours are going to be within the working hours already established by the town. And I don't know, do you want to add anything else to that, Chris?
And can you maybe we can remind everyone those working hours if you can, just so people
I don't have it home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I mean, I could pull it up on our code of ordinances, but I think, yeah, it would be helpful just so people know. Okay. I know you can. So yes, but
Before you go to, it's really, really important. We just had a big project with the YMCA renovation and construction. We had a big project with the library across the street. This is the third major project in one block area that we've had. So people are very sensitive about communication, about being heard, about their concerns. There are rules that we live by, and sometimes even those rules can be a little too flexible sometimes. So it's really important that we make sure that the people that we're interfering with on a daily basis are being cared for, because there's nothing worse than having to deal with those complaints and slowing things down.
Absolutely. And the only thing I'd add to Michael's comment is kind of lean on you a little bit, Dylan, as well, to have what we like to do in the beginning of these projects is have a real neighborhood meeting, bring around all the businesses, all the residential butters that could be impacted or fear they may be impacted or are curious. Sit with us and our contractor to lay out our hours, to know who they can contact if there's an issue. Not just myself, who's always available, but there'll be a person on site all the time that they can contact. And those neighborhood meetings we found to be really, really helpful to put a face to to the group that's working on it to face to the superintendent and the contractor. And we'll work with Dylan.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, because I think, yeah, as someone who represents, and I appreciate Councilor Gross for saying that I've heard this from constituents in the neighborhood of all the projects we've said. Now this will be the third large project here. So I think, yes, if we can have that, and I'm more than willing to help facilitate and communicate to the surrounding residents and the businesses, because I do think that would be helpful to have that initial, so they understand as this project goes, and then as this changes, just constant communication, and then also communicating with me if I can just communicate to the larger group of folks as well. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
You have some questions about the inclusionary? We're going to go through that as well, right? We're going to go through the sections 1.8.3 and all that stuff like that. We'll get to that, and we'll start talking about the expectations on the inclusionary housing 511. Okay, great.
Variations in height make this.
Oh.
No, that's okay. So I have the less interesting part of this presentation, but necessary. The only thing I'd like to add with regard to the neighborhood interaction is that my client has already started doing that. So I think that's indicative of what they can expect when the construction happens and all of that information. So beginning with the standard of 1.8.3, you are required to find that this project is, is in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the ordinance, and that it will not adversely affect the neighborhood, the zoning district, or the city so as to outweigh the benefit effects of the use. And we have gone through those in the presentation, but just to highlight those, I've created bullets for you. Social, economic, and community needs will be served. It advances the city's stated goals for downtown revitalization and housing production. It contributes to vitality and walkability of downtown. It will be creating new year-round residential units. Replacing the parking lot on Middle Street will bring it more into harmony with the historic district and that neighborhood. And strong community support is evidenced by the unanimous votes of ZBA and the historic district. Also, inclusionary housing requirements will be met with 4 on-site units at 60% area median income. Traffic flow and safety, as you heard, there was a traffic assessment done by Bowman Consulting Group, and that indicates a substantial reduction in peak hour traffic. Also, all of the parking under the GZO requirements are met. And there'll be a removal of the curb cut on Middle Street, which will create a continuous pedestrian frontage on Middle Street. The housing production plan found that downtown was a walker's paradise, and this project is only 3/8 of a mile from the commuter rail station. With regard to adequacy of utilities and public services, the utilities will be updated as necessary, and all necessary utilities are available and fed from Hancock Street and adjacent streets. Neighborhood character, the Main Street side of the project is consistent with downtown. The mid-block garden creates new green space and a canopy in a dense downtown environment, which is very rare in downtown. Sorry, I keep nudging this forward. On the Middle Street side, the project has generous setbacks that contribute to a more comfortable pedestrian experience, and the below-grade parking eliminates visible parking along Main Street and Middle Street. There will be a few spaces along the Hancock jet out that are there now that will remain. The height of the building is consistent with other buildings on Middle Street and Main Street, and they fit comfortably within those existing streetscapes. It's a thoughtful infill development. The qualities of the natural environment will be greatly improved. The street sides, green space, and mid-block garden will, and the below-grade parking add to the natural environment. The site now is not within a protected resource area or flood zone, and it currently has very minimal green space and is mostly impervious. With regard to fiscal impact, the redevelopment of the site represents a more productive and appropriate use, and it also generates new residential and commercial tax revenue and supports surrounding property values. also advances the highest and best use of this site while delivering tangible benefits to the city. Again, it is not vulnerable, it's not within a FEMA flood zone, and not in an area of projected sea level rise. With regard to the major project criteria, there are guidelines that are set for this council, and major projects should have access from arterial or collector streets. All vehicular access will be off of Hancock. Access from Main Street and Middle Street will only be pedestrian. And this access will be more than adequate to serve the site. The site plan also shows everything that is required under 5.7.5. The site plan shows access points, drainage, utilities, serving the buildings, also shows the majority of the parking being below grade. And lighting is going to be designed to avoid glare onto adjoining properties. There is a robust landscape plan, as Mr. LeBlanc went through on his project, part of his presentation. Also avoids major topographical alterations to the site. All other requirements of the zoning ordinance will be met, and the building code will be satisfied throughout and upon completion of the project. The multifamily residential use in a non-residential district is not strictly within a non-residential district. In the CB and CCD districts, they permit residential development. The project delivers a balanced mixed-use development that strengthens both residential and commercial functions of downtown. The city has identified this area as appropriate for higher density residential development, and ground floor retail and restaurant use will replace a long vacant building. CCD and CB districts already contain a number of mixed-use buildings, and residential use is expressly contemplated by the GCO. The CB and CCD uses themselves will not be noxious or incompatible with the multifamily residences because they are essentially retail, service establishment, restaurants. They provide convenient amenities for the project's residents. On Middle Street, it's entirely consistent with the residences in that area. And the other requirements under 5.7.5 are not applicable to this project. Lot area and open space, minimal lot area per unit or minimum open space may be decreased by the council by special permit, finding that lesser lot area or open space is in keeping with the neighborhood and the structural density. The project has 23,720 square feet of lot area, only 10,000 is required. Their allowing reductions is appropriate and consistent with the character and structural density of the surrounding downtown neighborhood. Main Street is constructed generally. The buildings are lot line to lot line with little or no open space, and where private outdoor space is generally considered by residents to be secondary to proximity to amenities. The neighborhood amenities such as shops and restaurants are also a benefit to the residents, as well as walking access to Gloucester Harbor, Harbor Walk, and a little longer walk to Stage Fort Park, Stacy Boulevard, and Pavilion Beach. The rental apartments help sustain a flexible year-round residential population and contribute consistently to the local economy. It also contributes to a vibrant, lived-in downtown. This site incorporates a mid-lot garden that will provide dedicated open space for the residents. With regard to height, the council must find that the increase is consistent with neighborhood character and will not be substantially detrimental to the neighborhood because of obstruction of views, overshadowing of other properties, impairment of utilities, or other adverse impacts. The requested height, as Mr. LeBlanc explained, was the result of a deliberate and careful considered design approach. It balances the neighborhood context, pedestrian experience, environmental quality, and economic feasibility. Main Street building measures 52 feet per the GZO, but the experience of a pedestrian will be of a 3-story building, approximately 39 feet from the sidewalk. The upper levels are away from the sight lines, and this is consistent with other buildings on Main Street. Middle Street is entirely consistent with the other buildings in that neighborhood. The additional height is required to eliminate visible parking, preserve a walkable, pedestrian-oriented Main Street, create a mid-block green space, and meaningful open space and tree canopy. It's directly tied to the design elements that make this project a benefit for the city. There are two distinct buildings, and the height is distributed and articulated, creating visual relief and preserving light and air between the buildings. The GZO 30-foot height could be met by consolidating the height into the garden area with a bulkier, less respectful building that we would consider that diminishes the neighborhood benefits. The impacts on views have been minimized through careful massing and setbacks, and mechanical equipment is shielded from view on both buildings. The util shadow study demonstrates that the incremental difference in shadow between a 30-foot building and a proposed project is limited. Primarily during the winter months, spring, summer, and fall, it's negligible. The project's height, massing, and setback are well calibrated to their surroundings and reinforce the established scale and character of the neighborhood it abuts. Design is intentionally grounded in its context, strengthening the streetscape and the public realm through the new green space, pedestrian-oriented uses, and thoughtful architectural detailing. By reactivating a long vacant site with a high-quality mixed-use development, the project delivers a meaningful community benefits while supporting the economic vitality necessary for long-term success. It advances the city's planning goals, complements the architectural character of downtown, and contributes to a more active and walkable, resilient neighborhood. The project represents a clear and lasting improvement to the site and its surroundings, and we request that you grant the special permits requested for this project. We're happy to answer any other questions you might have.
What are the anticipated rent costs for the market rate units?
Tough to give you exact numbers because we're, even in the best case scenario, we're 2 years out from any kind of delivery. Market changes a lot in that amount of time. But I think we're averaging on a per unit average, $3,600 is what's shown in our fiscal impact study. $3,600 blended across the whole building is the average rent from studios to 2 beds and blended. Per unit rents will kind of get determined as we get closer and unit layouts get really defined. But that's the average of all units.
While we're talking about units, can we talk, what's the breakdown in 2-bedroom, 1-bedroom studios?
We're just over 50% 2-bedroom. So we're predominantly 2 beds. I think we have 20%. So, what was the 2 bedroom? So 55% 2 beds, 40% 1 beds, which is a mix of 1s and 1 pluses that have den or other space, and 5% studios. So this is really geared towards the downsizing Gloucester local that's looking for this space.
I think there would be an expectation that the affordable units be a blend of those units so that they not all be studios. We might have
That's our understanding as well, that every unit type is represented.
Right, thank you.
And understood. Yep.
So we know that there'll be 4 deed restricted affordable units at 60% AMI. Is there anything else that might incentivize more units, more affordable units, even if they're at 80% AMI?
We can continue to study it. I would say that as Michael kind of pointed out in the presentation, we've made some deliberate choices that we think respect the local neighborhood and community, and those come with real costs. Construction costs generally are high today. We're making some costs that are making the project inherently more expensive to, in our view, really benefit the community by making those choices. So we'd have to do some deeper study as we get closer. We can only really commit to the 4 and 6% AMI. But as we get closer to market, as we understand rents, we'll continue to study those things. 4 units at 60% is our current commitment.
And then I know you mentioned condos versus renting, but what would prevent the owner from converting units to condominiums?
We as owner of the building. Yeah. So our focus, especially in the makeup of the units and where they're located, is to keep these rentals. We feel like they help the downtown fabric. We feel like it's a more stable, predictable tax base for Gloucester itself. Our focus is long-term managers. We really want to create community. So to be controllers of the retail space and the residential above is our long-term vision for the project.
Thank you.
If I could just add to that, zoning doesn't control whether it's condos or apartments, but once the apartments are established, there are statutes that have a certain conversion process, which is not really an easy process to follow legally.
Thank you.
Ellen, do you have any further
I
questions?
don't. I appreciate.
Do you have any
Thank you.
questions on anything else? All right. If you're amenable, Deb, I'm gonna gingerly open it up to potential questions from the audience. I want to remind people that this is not a public hearing. You're best off, frankly, if you have a very strong opinion one way or the other, let us know later in the process when it actually is further in our minds. I really don't want this to be a time for making speeches. I really want people to ask questions about the project itself, its potential impact on the city, anything that on that front that interests people. But let's keep the public hearing kind of comment down, because we haven't advertised it as that, and it's not fair for people who didn't show up to the meeting. So if there is anybody online or in the audience who has a question, please just raise your hand. We can go for them. Oh, Marjorie Grace. I meant to acknowledge you. Marjorie Grace is our Ward 3 City Councilor.
Thanks. Just a quick question. In that 2023-24, the city did a parking study, all in the whole downtown area. Is any of that study being looked at in regard to how you can lessen the impact of cars on Hancock Street and that wonky intersection that comes from Dale Avenue and kind of kitty corners over to Hancock Street? It's kind of a weird thing to navigate and with larger vehicles. And I know there was some recommendations in this parking study about making certain other roads one-way streets, kind of switching things around. Has any of that been looked at or considered to try to help with alleviating some of the congestion that's down there?
So there is certain amount of parking that's required in the GZO. And so we've met that parking requirement there. I don't believe there's an opportunity to reduce that unless we sought a reduction, which we have not. And I don't believe that there's been a review of the parking study. I don't know. But as I said, the parking is compliant with the city ordinance.
With adding or subtracting parking, it's more concerned with this parking study that was done. Kind of went into areas where if they switched, Dale Avenue, for instance, I don't remember if that's in there, but just as a for instance, instead of being one way this way, you turn it one way that way. Middle Street was considered to change from changing the direction. Hancock Street was considered, the other road down the street, I don't remember, was it Short Street was considered. How would they change that? How would that help with traffic flow and adding this? This is really nothing to do with parking. And, you've covered all the bases with that. Because it does get tight down there when you turn from, kind of come across from, because that's your only access is from Dale Avenue to go across there, unless you kind of go down Main Street and come around the other way again. So I'm just curious if any of that has been looked at, or could you, or would you look at it to see if any of that would be pertinent to discuss and bring up to maybe make it a little bit easier to navigate?
I don't believe that the applicant would have any ability to make any of those changes, but it's certainly something, we could look at the parking situation. There is, other parking off of that road, and I would expect that it would be considered if the city decided to make any changes to directions or road layout or any of that, which would not really be within the applicant's purview, but certainly something we could take a look at.
Okay, thank you. It would actually end up increasing the number of parking spaces on Middle Street, would you not, by a couple, by closing off that? Yeah, we do. So, that's there, 2 spaces, yeah. We have Rich Carlson. Can you bring these people in, or should I do it? If I do it, they'll get hung up on by accident. So, Rich Carlson, you got a question for us?
Yeah, basically, real quick, just to say again, I think the plan is a great one, but I have a concern about the parking. I know that they're meeting the zoning requirements of one unit, one car, or one parking space. What happens? Has there been any thought or has been any study as to what happens to the rest of the people who come with multiple cars? There are some two bedrooms there. They're probably going to end up with more than one car. Where do they end up parking and what's going to be the impact on that?
Okay.
So I think as Rich touched on in the beginning, we've met the letter of GZO for parking. We do have two bedrooms. We are thoughtful about who our renters will be. There'll be conversations from as simple as do they have pets to how many cars do they have, right? So there is some level of control in terms of how many cars are taken into the lot. There are some tandem spaces in the garage you see geared towards the two bedrooms. They can navigate as they use the two spaces there. We'll have to continue to monitor it in terms of how many people come in with multiple cars. Our real vision and thesis for the product is that these are Gloucester locals. These are locals to the community that live and work in the community. They're either relying on walkable life. We've already been receiving calls from people interested in being on a list to be in the building because they want to sell their homes in Gloucester and to be in an amenity-rich environment that they could walk to without relying on a car all the time. So we're seeing that trend more and more, and we're believing in it. But we'll continue to monitor renters as they come, and those are questions on our application when they come, how many cars they have, so we can make sure that the garage meets their requirements.
I will say too, Rich, anecdotally, talking to people who live down here who have given up one car of a couple, or they find zero problem finding places to park sort of after hours. So there is a lot of empty space at night. And not that we want to encourage, I think part of our zoning is to try to discourage having additional cars beyond the one. And the idea is to try to minimize having cars downtown as much as possible. But if people do have to have two or insist on having two, certainly in the after hours and evening times, there's places for these cars to be parked. And then they have to deal with the same problems that everybody else has to deal with during the daytime hours. Yes, Laura.
I have a question about the after hours.
Okay. Laura, just for name and address for the record.
I'm Laura Taywater. I live at 90 Middle Street here in Gloucester.
In that beautiful house, they right?
Beautiful house that y'all saw. So what we observed from the Y was that there was not any planning for overnight guests. And so the parking has increased in our neighborhood in the evenings because we come out the next day and their cars are still there. So we know that their guests are parking on Dale Ave and on Middle Street. So that would be my question, is with 40 units, so that's 40 people. So let's say an extra 20 that come over on the weekends. Where are they going to park? Because this will really increase, the traffic and overnight traffic. I mean, that's the reality of it.
Yeah.
So just something to think about.
Right.
All right.
I mean, they do meet the letter of the law in terms of, and frankly, they haven't asked for any relief from this, which is a positive
that's
thing.
not even my
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
It's the reality of the situation on a daily, nightly basis
Right.
of what's real and what is, thoughtful.
Keep that in the discussion.
Yeah, I would just think about it.
Well,
Okay.
great.
All right. Thank you.
We have Marianne Boucher. I'm going to go online and then I'll go to you if that's okay. Marianne, have you got a question for us?
Thank you, Mary Ann Boucher, 93 Mount Pleasant Avenue. Since the Santander Bank has been closed and there hasn't been any parking in that parking lot, and the John Meany building has now gone up with, I believe, 44 living units. That garage, the John Meany garage, where the residents enter and exit, will that be directly across from the entrance and exit of this new building? um, as I see it could be quite congested. I'm just curious about that. And also, people speaking on the mic, some of them are very difficult to hear. So I'd ask that people speak louder and pull the
I
mic.
always try to speak really loud.
Thank you very much.
I would hazard a guess to the end. It's not a really difficult question for the applicant to answer, but we're not talking about cars that are coming out on a regular, it's not like an intersection. It's cars that are coming out occasionally here and there, and your neighbor across the street pull out of their driveway at the same time you might pull out your
I
driveway.
believe the traffic study said one car every 3 minutes, but I also would like to point out that the garage entrance for the Y and the entrance to the jet out onto Hancock Street are offset, first of all. And secondly, the jet out, the garage entrance, there is room for cars to queue off of Hancock Street, where the Y doesn't have that. But this has quite a length for the cars to queue before they go into the garage.
Can you clarify what you mean by offset?
There's that little jog that comes off of, so the Santander property is generally off of Main and Middle, and then there's a little jog jet out onto Hancock Street, which is sort of like a driveway with some parking on the side. And so you will pull into there before you get into the garage, and there are areas to queue going in and out so that there won't be any conflict with the Y garage.
Yeah, I understand. I'm just thinking, yeah, no, I get it. I'm just thinking people listening, and
Yep.
I think the more clarification, the better for everyone. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Name and address for the record.
Hi, Rosie Lentini. I'm 667 Western Ave, but I own property from 37 to 43 Main Street. My concern, one car every 3 minutes. We get very, very congested down the West End. I still drive Main Street, and I still have to sit right there at that parking lot, right where the corner is that comes around. And I sit there because I have to wait with traffic.
Mhm.
There is traffic. So my thing is we're adding more cars. You're adding a restaurant, you're adding retail. There's going to be more traffic. So there has to be more work and more studies into the traffic that's going on Main Street, because there's going to be a lot more congestion coming down Main Street with trucks that have for deliveries in the morning, because there are deliveries, there are larger trucks, there are smaller trucks. Then you also have the vehicles that come down. And if they're
Let's finish this with a question mark.
I'm sorry,
Okay.
but you have one car every 3 seconds. I want to know how they're going to be able to acknowledge, they're going to be able to help out with that as far as traffic wise.
Okay, so how is that going to impact traffic
Yes.
on Main Street,
On the West End.
on the West End?
I'll speak again a little bit, take it to the Bowman study, right, which is the per diem 57, 59 cars. In the morning, the expectation of those cars is they're leaving, which means it's a left out on Hancock to Main Street, and then they exit. And in the evening, they don't engage technically with Main Street. They're a left in off Hancock onto our property coming from the Middle Street direction, right? So are there cars created by a project of new development? Absolutely. The reason I gave the context comparison is when the bank was there and functioning, you see the size of the surface lot there, the size of the parking field that building required. The assumption is all those cars were coming and going throughout the day. That was 146 cars, right? So our goal is yes, there's absolutely cars. We kind of can't mitigate that entirely, but we can by means of, it's a downtown location. This isn't a suburban residential development with surface parking where you're very reliant upon your vehicle. Downtown, as I kind of pointed out earlier, we hope that people don't rely on their car outside of the weekend excursions or the need to commute to work. And it's reduction, pretty significant reduction from the use that exists on site today, but is sitting vacant.
I would expect too that a lot of people who lived in that in those units would just go straight down Hancock Street to Rogers Street. And what I would, I mean, I avoid driving on Main Street as much as possible, but going straight down and left or right on Rogers Street makes more sense than going down to Main Street. Yeah. So, but all valid questions. This is how we get to a better decision. How are we doing with people online? We got anybody online? Yeah, please.
So looking at the slides, you're envisioning the bottom space being a restaurant / retail. Are you looking for it to be a restaurant and retail? Or are you looking for specifically just one or the other? Just to see what you're envisioning, and maybe that will change as this project goes forward.
Yeah, I mean, the retail thesis can certainly change, right? It's 3,500 square feet of ground floor retail. I'd say the piece that we're committed to is it's active use retail, right? So what I mean by that is, for the board, is a passive use would be a bank, a mattress store, a mobile store, a cell phone store.
Another realtor.
Right? Like those are passive uses. They're not engaging. They don't draw foot traffic. A restaurant, a grocery store, a local market. Those kind of things we view as active use. They have meaningful footfall. They bring people as a pedestrian level to that end, and they have a vibrancy and a memory to them that people want to be a part of that place. That I think we can commit to. That's our vision for that space. The pieces that will change is who occupies it, right? So we don't quite know. We're early in the process. It's 3,500 square feet, so would never be more than 2 retailers, and very likely would be 1. And if it's 1, it's in the restaurant world, right? The 3,500 square feet of a modest scale. So we're exploring all those options. We're open to a lot, but active use is our focus.
And you mentioned with that, and a grocery, is that something you'd be looking at, or you said grocery store? So just
I said grocery. I mean,
I know people
general
probably
store
are thinking
or
they'd be
market.
excited about that because of the loss of the grocery store in downtown. So if that's something possibly, I know you can't guarantee that, but
Can't guarantee it, but it's an exciting use that we're absolutely exploring.
Yeah.
Because in our mind, those are not just said active use, but those are neighborhood servicing retail, right? So when you get those kind of active footfall generating neighborhood servicing, I mean, they do well. And we are big believers that that's what would do well on Main Street and would service the community. So that's our focus.
Anybody else with a question? Again, Councilor Grace.
Invite people, so.
Yeah, I know. I made that mistake, didn't I?
Sorry. Of course. The 4 parking places that are utilized by the condos that were built above the curtain shop, are those going to be eliminated, or will they be remaining for the use of the people that live there?
They won't physically be eliminated, but they'll be a part of our project and they're included in our count. So they wouldn't be for the condos next door. They'd be for this project.
So that just creates a problem with the people that live there, but we will cross that later. And my second question is, there's a home that is built, it directly abuts the, where the entrance and exit would be coming in to get to the garage. Is there any forethought put into what can you do to, kind of spruce that up a little bit so that they're not just looking at cars coming in and out all day? Is there any landscaping or fencing or anything along that line? I know we did get a letter asking about that, so I think it's something, if we could answer it right away for the resident, would be really good.
It's a great question, and I've been in kind of constant communication with Carol, one of the condo owners there, who expressed a similar concern. And I guess I would say that we're in active studies. And some part of it is there's 2 condos, there's 3 tandem parking spaces that are kind of lined up there. We are open to visual screening of our drive aisle from that parking. But at the same time, we want to make sure that all the parking is still usable for her and the other condo members. So it's going to be a little bit of a study. But like all abutters, all residential and commercial abutters, I mean, we're continuing to kind of have those conversations with them. I hear her concerns, and I think we'll find a good solution there. Absolutely. Yep. Reasonable concern.
All right. No hands up in the air. Barnaby, no? Okay. Paul, back there? Oh, okay. Just making sure. Um, let's talk next steps, if we could. Deb, this now will go as a presentation to the planning board. My
Yes.
understanding is that's going to happen in 2 weeks. They had to cancel tomorrow night's planning board.
They did cancel tomorrow's planning board. They are investigating whether they can do a special meeting next week.
Okay.
But
And
the
then,
latest would be 2 weeks.
so they'll get their presentation. The various professional third-party reviews and departmental reviews have to take place. Do we have a time frame idea how long that's going to take?
It's really hard to say. I know from experience that the first step is to have a proposal from the peer reviewer, and then that proposal gets accepted by the applicant. Then the peer reviewer does a report, and then the applicant has an opportunity to respond to that report. So definitely takes several weeks at a minimum.
Okay, so we got that process, and then, of course, they take those reports and they incorporate them into the planning board. I'm just sort of also
Correct.
putting the process out there. The planning board will have a public hearing.
Yes.
I'm taking it that
I
What?
don't know whether it's a public hearing or a meeting.
I don't know either. I thought,
I think it's a
Said
meeting because they
it's a
only
meeting.
make a recommendation.
yeah, I can't remember. Some of these they have public hearings, some of them they don't. I'm off. I'm not sure exactly which, but regardless, there's going to be a site visit, and I've asked, I sent a note to Greg asking that we could try to consolidate our site visit, which I think
Okay.
would be the most productive. That'll happen in the next few weeks, I'm assuming. You will get the recommendation from the planning board. It'll come back to P&D. We'll go through the reports and the response from the planning board and any changes that arose or didn't arise, and we'll come up with our recommendation of the three of us, which will then go to the city council for a full public hearing and a vote. So nothing's happening in the next couple of weeks.
No.
Okay. Do we have an expectation on the when we have to open the public hearing?
We will have to open the public hearing on the
April 14th?
19th, I believe.
Which day?
So, no, the 19th. 1 second.
Well, it'll be opened and continued for the sake of folks watching the
It will be open and continued on the 14th, pending, and we'll take it up for public hearing pending the site reviews and the planning.
Of this month
April?
or,
Sorry, the 14th of April.
okay.
Okay. All right, that's great. That's where we're going. I will just repeat my offer. Anybody who has questions about the project, things that come up later on, reach out to any one of the three of us, but especially me. Send me an email, give me a call, and we will endeavor to make sure that those questions and concerns are brought up during the discussions. So the important process in all of this is that we uncover all the stones that need to be uncovered, and we answer the questions that need to be answered. Some of the questions will be answered the way you want them to be. Some of them won't be. Some of them won't be the way the applicant wants them. That's the process. But we will try to make sure that we are very clear about everything going forward. If there's nothing else, we have nothing else?
The only thing, Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
I'd like to add is that the applicant is open to hearing from abutters and their concerns also directly.
Please do. I'd like to also, I'd love to, are you amenable to having your deck put online for people to see?
Yes.
Yeah, because it's the clearest one yet. I think it's a really clear opportunity for people to see the project. And
Right. I
and put in
believe it
context.
would be on ZBA and Historic District, but they had a different focus, obviously. So yes, we can provide that to lines to
That'd
get
be
it
great.
put on.
That would be great.
Appreciate
yeah.
that.
And yeah, because then we can direct constituents to
Yeah.
that.
I find that the most important thing is to make sure people's questions are answered. And then once that happens, they will feel better about the project, or they won't, but they won't have any reason not to feel like they weren't heard.
And I appreciate your offer of having some sort of neighborhood meeting. And I think that may, from what I'm understanding, is I think that probably would be better if this is approved to have that later on, because that would be questions around construction and all that. So, but I appreciate you providing that offer, and we will follow up depending
Okay.
on how things go.
Very good. Thank you.
Awesome. We'll take a motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much for coming out, everybody. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.